Hello, hello. Welcome to episode 46 of Wise Wednesdays with RK. Yes, we are airing today at a different time, and that's because I have a very, very special guest with me today, all the way from Australia, the other side of the world. And we didn't want him to wake up at 4 a.m. So we said, let's do this at a different time where it is able to serve maximum number of people possible. So conversation today is with Steve, or Stephen De Sede, as I hope I got that right, as everyone pronounce him, as his name is, and. Who is he? He is the unstoppable confidence coach. He is an inspiration mentor. He is a brand narrator, story power strategist, founder of the De Sede Institute, coach's coach, mentor's mentor, author, builder of businesses across cultures, outstanding human above all. I've had the pleasure of meeting him personally while I was in Perth a few years ago, and that conversation has been remarkable, as will be this one. So without further ado, I bring to you, ta-da-da-da, Steve.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I always blush when I hear all of that. It's yes.
Well,
Hello everyone, wherever you are. Bless you
yes.
for tuning in.
Thank you. So, Steve, what I usually do is I play a little promo video so that those who are new to the conversation get to understand what Wise Wednesdays is all about. It gives
Right.
them an opportunity to see what's been discussed, and then we kind of segue into the conversation.
Let's
All
do it.
right, so let's do this. All right. Wise Wednesdays started on April 1st with a humble episode on forgiveness. Between then and now, we've had heart-led conversations on happiness, stress management, relationships, resilience, public speaking, respecting boundaries, self-discovery, mindset, just being, listening, reclaiming your life, intuition, and even food. I would like to thank all my listeners and the guests who gave me their time and trust. It is because of you that we kept going. It is because of you that we kept growing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you so, so much.
Wow.
Yes,
I'm gonna have
thank
to put
you.
my better smile on to keep up with you. How beautiful. Yes,
Thank you.
some lovely people I know in there. So wonderful.
Yes, yes.
Great.
We've had amazing people on board, and the whole concept is about inviting people from my circle of genius, as I like to call it, on
Mm.
board, and we hash and we talk about different topics, etc. And it's always the speaker who decides what they want to speak on. And I remember reaching out to you, and you said, "I want to speak on commanding expectations."
Yeah, amongst many things. Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. So tell me, what do you mean when you say commanding expectations? Because as far as I know, a lot of us live as per the expectations of others. So when you say come in and say commanding expectations, what does that even mean?
When you asked me, it was literally came to me on the spot because there's a million things I could talk to you about. So,
Yes.
and there's so much dialogue now because of the circumstances that we human beings are on. I always say most people look into the mirror of life and ask someone else, "Who do you see?" Most people are addicted to opinion. So the end result is our expectations are normally aligned to what someone else's expectation is. And then some people say, well, I set my expectations. Well, I love the concept, and I've not taught about this, although I did something in some coaching I did weekend just gone. Commanding expectation is to be so focused on what it is that you want, it eliminates anyone else's opinion. And it almost eliminates any of your fears, any of your doubts, because like I know you're a parent because I've met your lovely children. When you're a parent, I'm not, so I'll speak from a place of observation. If you think of the most important things in your life, you don't have an attitude of an alignment. You have an attitude of commanding your attention to be present to why you invited your children into this world in the first place. So commanding expectations is everyone stop saying that this is a new norm or an old norm, or we need to get used to this or this or this. What are you commanding into your life in the same way that things that happen that are really soulful to us command our attention. If you think of the things that grab our attention, they don't. They almost command our attention. We don't align to the fact that we need to be good to our children. We don't align to the fact that we need to do the right things morally in society. It's almost, we just stand to attention for it. How many people are aligning to their values rather than commanding their discipline to try and be what they hope to be? So I tell all of the people across De Sede land, stop aligning to expectations, stop setting expectations, and start commanding what you want your life to be, because this is your one shot at it.
Okay, I'm grinning ear to ear because I love what you said, and I've noticed that Cindy is watching. So, hi, Cindy. We also have Hassan who's watching, and yes, we've got Melody watching all the way from Massachusetts.
I know
And
Melody.
yes, you do.
I do.
Thank you for tuning in. So, thank you everyone for tuning in. And a little about Steve is that he is known for the kind of conversation that can have the potential to change lives. He is very simple in the way he conveys what he does, and it is remarkable the kind of impact that he delivers. So, again, how do you exactly command expectations? I know that's supposed to be done, but how would you do it?
But if you, one of the things, and I appreciate you saying keeping it simple, because we get really complicated about things.
Yep.
But we're sitting in a corner office, and this happened, and I was speaking to Melody inside of De Sede land in the Institute Cafe on Saturday. Many years ago, I was sitting in England. There was a meeting with a lot of high-powered people. It was about counter-terrorism, biometrics and all those things. It was just after the London bombings. And a particular gentleman sitting in the room, won't mention his name, got a phone call to say that his little daughter had run around behind the bus and actually got knocked over by a car that was overtaking the bus. And sadly, she passed on the roadside. He didn't even pick his gear up. He picked his phone up and got told, and that commanded his attention, and he just left. So to me, commanding attention is making a distinction on what's a priority in your life, and then actually commanding your attention to do the best you can in your efforts. So for example, we want to be well, we want to have mindfulness and wellness, and we want to do the right thing on our diet. And then we go along and all of a sudden find out there's a lump somewhere, or we find out that there's some situation somewhere. And just like that, our attention's commanded that all of a sudden our diet needs to change. All of a sudden our eating habits need to change. All of a sudden our health and well-being needs to change. Commanding your attention is when your mortality is actually brought to your attention. And most people think their mortality is something that's going to happen if you're 20, 50, 60, 70 years from now. That young girl's mortality actually came to her presence and came to her attention after a school run when she was still 11 years old. So when people think they've got time to be able to get their health better, time to get their life better, time to get their relationships better, your mortality is at any moment's notice. And when you find out that your health is not good, or someone that you care for is in some way impacted, all of a sudden our attention's changed. So our attention to homeschooling, our attention to having to live with a pandemic, all of a sudden that commanded our attention, and the whole world stopped. Yeah. So my view is, what would cause your world to stop? Because you need to stop waiting for something to actually make it stop, and for you to command how you want to live the rest of your life. Because that little girl, Alice, the rest of her life lasted 11 years. The young boy that I wrote a book about for one of my team, his life lasted 159 days. So I don't want to get morbid, everyone. This is your one shot at life. Why is so many people waiting for something to grab their attention before it starts commanding their expectations?
I hear you. And I also know the story about the little boy, but tell us more about that, because that's such a powerful story as well. The book that you wrote.
I wrote a book called Nathaniel's Chance. When I started all of this, I came back from England after being very successful and then losing lots of things, and suicide and financial and bankruptcy and emotional bankruptcy. And I started making videos. I started listening to different people, Brendan Burchard and all this, about how to package up your expertise. And I just spent the previous 10 years traveling all over the world, getting paid a lot of money as a consultant, doing all kinds of things. So I started making videos, but I wouldn't show anyone because I lost everything. So I thought there was something wrong with me, but I kept making the videos. And as Melody knows, and others who may be watching, those videos are 8 or 9 years ago that I recorded, and they have an impact. And everything inside the Institute is a video, a podcast, a transcript, and a guide sheet. It's huge, but it took me a decade to make it, but I never showed anyone. And along that journey, there was all kinds of transcriptions going on. And one of the ladies, Jane, who was helping me, ended up getting a lady called Anne to help her because there was just too much content. Then I got news that Anne was having a baby, sent a beautiful little photo that hangs on my wall now. But 3 hours after he was born, her attention got commanded when he threw up gangrenous cells, and his stomach was taken out because he basically had about 1% of his stomach available to him. The other 99% was gone. So within 3 hours of him being born, Anne, as a nurse, found out that her little boy, from a professional perspective and a medical perspective, she knew he was dead, but as a mum, she wanted him to live. And 159 days later and 6 cardiac arrests later, he passed away. So I sent a video called Present Reality because he didn't know any different. He didn't know that he didn't have a stomach. He saw his mother and he saw what little children do with their mothers. They want to breastfeed and all those things, and he didn't know any different. So the milk would go through his mouth and go out a catheter because he couldn't contain it in his body. There was nowhere to put it. So about 6 or 7 weeks after he was born, I got an email via Jane from Anne saying, because of all the videos they watched, they kind of put me in a fairly authoritative level, which is very humbling. And her message was simply this, and I thought he was fine. I didn't know anything was wrong. And the message actually said, I can't watch my little boy go through this anymore. Jane, will you ask Steve permission for me to ask God for him to be taken? And that's in chapter 1 of the book. And I basically said to Anne, when Nathaniel and God are ready for him to leave, then he'll leave. He doesn't need his mother's doubt. And 159 days later he left. I created a video called Present Reality about what a little boy taught me about claiming your life. That ended up being the eulogy at his funeral. And then I went to the Philippines about 7 or 8 months later, and in 4 days I wrote Nathaniel's charts. What would you do if you had 159 days left to live? Because everyone thinks this is a dress rehearsal. No, it's not. This is it.
Exactly.
This is it. I mean, I met your 2 beautiful children, 2 years ago when I flew through Perth, and you happened to be in Perth at the same time when we had coffee in Fremantle.
Yes.
They're 2 years older now. They're not. They're further towards their adulthood than their childhood, and you'd know that as your mum because you're watching them. Their life is progressing. So I live every single day of my life now as if it's Nathaniel's 160th. If he had one more day to live, how present would he be to that life? And I live like that now. So I dedicate my life to the little boy who was born dead, and I'm currently writing my next book, which is called My Bucket List Is You. Because if you told people you had 159 days left to live, what would you do? They'd talk about all these fancy things. I would be doing this. Speaking to the one person out there, reinforcing to the likes of Melody and other De Sede guests, this is what you need to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Being present, totally present in the now, being you is so important. When or what was it? Because we're talking about commanding expectations, about how life kind of corners you and you have, people wake up to it suddenly. What was your wake up moment?
I went to England in 1998. I was an insurance intermediary, and I read a book by a guy called Bill Gates that said this thing called the World Wide Web and the superhighway and disintermediation. And it took me a year to be able to pronounce that. But the world's richest man at the time was telling me that at 35 years of age, the career that I'd spent the last 10 or 12 years since school doing was going to be disintermediated. Banks would run without branches. Travel agents would run without all the stuff that we take for granted now. And he was talking about that, and I'm sitting there thinking, I'm 35 and I'm an intermediary. I'm a middleman in insurance. So I did what anyone of 35 years of age would do back in 1998 before gap years were invented. We just decided to go to England, and my attitude was really, really simple, and it's a message to everyone. What's your mantra in life? Because my mantra is I'm really good with people, and there's 65 million there. How could I possibly fail? So I walked into the UK without any IT experience, which you needed, without any project management qualifications, which you needed, and without any security clearance to work for any government or anyone touching with the government, which you needed. So I walked in as a 35-year-old with no experience whatsoever, and no one would give me a job. They told me to go to Greece, party, chase girls, and then go back to Australia. So the end result is, through one thing or another, all of us created a consultancy, created a property business, became extremely wealthy, had houses in Europe and England and both sides of Australia. And my relationship turned into a commercial partnership, and when we flooded with millions of dollars literally within 2 or 3 years, and it all faltered and everything. So in 2008, I took a convertible for a drive with my fancy black Amex and put the roof down and tried to kill myself because I'd lost my wife, I'd lost all my cars, I'd lost everything. And I thought I was useless. So I decided, if I'm so useless that I've lost all of this stuff that I actually got in such a short period of time, I know what I'll do. I'll exit stage right from the planet. And through a whole series of events on the night that it happened, the police let us off, telling me to earn it. And I haven't got time to tell you the whole story. 3 years later, I came back to Australia, and I walked back into Australia with nothing. Absolutely nothing. I was financially and emotionally bankrupt. All the keys to my houses, all the millions of dollars was gone. I gave that to my wife and I left. And a friend of mine was doing coaching and asked, in the context of your question, she said, "Hey, Steve, can I use you as my guinea pig doing my pro bono coaching for life coaching?" And I went, "Yeah, fine, that's cool." 3 sessions, 3 sessions, and 3 sessions. So there's 9 sessions we need to do. And I thought, well, I'm not going to make it up. So when she rang me and asked me, what are we going to talk about, as if I'd approached her, I just started telling her my story. And on Christmas Eve in 2011, 3.5 years after the accident, she asked me on the 7th session, what did the accident mean? And no one had ever asked me that. For the last 3 years, I thought I was so stupid. I lost all my houses, lost the love of my life, and I was so dumb I couldn't even kill myself. I mean, one would think with a bottle of gin and the roof down on a convertible and 150 Ks and tear the car in half, surely that would do it. But it didn't. So I lived for 3 years thinking I was so stupid I couldn't kill myself. I'd lost everything, and then I was so dumb I couldn't even lose my life. And in that moment, to answer your question, she said, what did the accident mean? And for the first time in my life, I just said, my maker valued me so much, he saved me for my own free will. There was more for me to do. So I survived that night so I could go to Fremantle and talk to your children for that hour that I did. And so the little boy the guy that tried to kill himself has now dedicated his life to the little boy who was born dead. So, and even though I've never spoke about commanding expectations and things, it was just something when you asked me, what are we going to talk about? And I've been talking a lot and teaching and training a lot about prioritization. I just got to a point of realizing, what am I going to do with this gift? And everyone, you have a gift. You may not be a great speaker. You may not be someone who can make videos. You may not be someone who has some of the things said that I get said to me. Every single human being in the world has a gift, and everyone's trying to get someone else to tell them what it is rather than look in the mirror and love what you see.
True that. So true. A year after I met with you in Fremantle, I was in a car crash too. Not that it was intended, but it happened. And the way the car was when I stepped out of it was almost crushed into half. Yet nothing happened to me, not even a scratch. And I was in conversation with...
That's right. I remember now. Yes, I do. I remember you sent me some information about it. Thank goodness.
Yes. And so I was in conversation with a friend who's also a coach. And he said, looking at that car, those pictures, he said, this car crash is you. I said, why would you say that? And he said, because you've had this crash for a reason. And if you were to identify yourself with the crash, what would you anticipate, or what would you kind of, translate it into? And what you said was what I thought, that I'm here for doing a little bit more, been given an extra time on life for a reason. And that's when I really started reconsidering the things that I've been doing, the way I've been prioritizing things, doing the stuff that I do, and beginning to set boundaries where I need to, being a little bit more honest with myself and my life. So yes, things do change, and sometimes you need that you know collision, I guess.
Yeah,
Unfortunately,
but sometimes that collision can be as subtle as looking into the eyes of your children.
true. That's
It
true.
doesn't have to be as dramatic. And as I say in the book, maybe your life isn't suicidal thoughts and car accidents. It doesn't have to be that. It
No,
just needs to be that realization. Maybe it's witnessing something that's happened to others, and it doesn't have to be of loss. It can be something really grand. I mean, I every single day because I don't have kids and I'm not married and I'm single. I'm in love. I'm in a love affair with every human being on the planet. So at the moment, that's what I do. And but I'll walk down the street, and it was only on the weekend. I was somewhere nice here in Sydney, and there was a gentleman with his daughter, and she would have been 8 or 9. And I just looked and realised that I'll never know what that feels like. But my job is, whether it's that person or someone else, to make sure that they never forget how special that is.
true that.
So for those listening, you might think, well, I haven't had, big success in England. I haven't had a car accident like the two of you. No, but what happens if this coming weekend, wherever you are in the world, you see something that touches your heart? It might be a guy opening the door for a lady, and more of that should happen. It may be a father and his daughter playing in the park. And I don't have kids. I didn't sit there and regret that I didn't have that. It just made me realize, what's my version of that will make a difference in someone else's life. So again, it goes back to that thing of, too many people are focusing on, what's that grand why? What's that why that I need to find? And the Simon Sinek book, which is all fine. And, Steve's had this big impact. And then this person, the gentleman with his child and stuff, and you go, no. Just go out this weekend and observe what's around you. And whatever touches your heart, ask yourself, why did it trigger it? And then embrace that. And if it triggered it because it makes you feel sad, there's another coin to sadness. It's called hope and faith. Sadness is just you forgetting why you started.
I like that. I like that. And as you said, looking at your children, one conversation on the bus, again, that trip to Perth was definitely pivotal for me, where I sat with my son, and he asked me about what I've been up to. And this was a time when I wasn't doing anything, like absolutely nothing. Everything was on standstill for me after Papa's passing. And he said, all of that is fine. I said, I don't feel like it. And he said, all of that is fine. But what about accountability? Because this was a value that I taught him, and he'd observed in me, and up came that question, and I had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide from that question. And that kind of, it's interesting. What you say is what touches your heart. Being totally present and understanding that, yes, this is something that has potential to change the way I look at my world. And yes.
I often say to people, when your mind stops you, you're in a coma. When your heart stops, you're in a coffin. When you have a relationship bust up, it breaks your heart. When you lose your job, it breaks your heart. When you see your kids coming home and you're not sure how to teach them algebra because you don't know how to help school, it breaks your heart. When you get fired at work, or you lose your job, or something happens, it breaks your heart. When 9/11 happened, when Fukushima happened, when the tsunami happened, it breaks your heart. It doesn't break your mind, it breaks your heart. So be heart-centered. It didn't break my heart seeing that. I looked at it and thought, what is my version of that? If
Yes.
I wasn't, and everyone, if you think you've missed out on something, stop thinking that you missed out on something, and ask yourself, I don't have children, I'm not married, that circumstance and that time of my life has come and gone, but I'm now called uncle in 5 different languages around the world. I'm godparent to 5 children in the Philippines, and I've never met them. Melody, who's watching this, and other De Sede guests who may be watching this, there's a joke in De Sede land that everyone's bartering over who's going to adopt Steve. So the end result is, every single time you look at something that tweaks your heart, it's going to tweak your heart for 2 reasons, everyone. It's going to tweak your heart to uplift you. It's going to tweak your heart to sadden you. And sadness will just darken your hope. An uplifting heart will ignite and illuminate your faith.
True that. Okay. We're talking about igniting, igniting hearts and illuminating faith.
Yep.
Tell me what are your thoughts? And I'm going to take you on a different tangent altogether. Tell me your thoughts on validations, because we live in a world where, validations are looked at, seeked all the time. So tell me a little bit of your thoughts on validations.
Validation is consumed by most people in the form of opinion. Most people's drug called a validation is activated by opinion. In the first 50 people may have heard this, but in the first 50 years of your life, everything's about accumulation. You get a life, you get an education, you get into a relationship or whatever, and I'll do this quickly, you acquire a house, you acquire a relationship, you acquire children, you're accumulating. And then when you get to about 45 to 50, the children start to move on and they start their form of accumulation and everything. And then the second 50 years of your life is about significance. It's about where's my sense of significance. Now, I've created my family. There's a certain level of prosperity, maybe in terms of the context of my financial circumstance. I've got my home, blah, 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 blah. I've gone to my few holidays. There's more of my life behind me than ahead of me. So where's my sense of significance? So the first 50, to answer your question, is about accumulation. The second 50 is about significance. But from the day you're born to the day you die, your life's about validation. And in the first 50 years, you're validating yourself by the way you accumulate your life. And in the second 50 years, you validate yourself by the way you create significance in your life. But the problem is most people have outsourced their accumulation because I'm going to accumulate and compete on status rather than stature. Status is you against average. Stature is you against your high achievement. So most people are using their accumulation to be in the right postcode, the right house, the right jacket, whatever it might be. And then when they're getting to that sense of significance, then after 50, they're now looking for what's the opinion of what I should or shouldn't be doing based on someone else. And I say this, and I say this to you, and I love you to bits because I think you're a sweetheart of a human being. I don't care what you think of me. I really don't. I couldn't care less. You know why? I'm so focused on how you care for you. I haven't got time to worry what you think about me because I'm not going to hurt you. Most people are so bothered about what people... I could care less about what you think of me because I'm so focused on how I can be of value to you. I hope your children are watching because I'd love to be able to say hello to them again. So the end result is the very first thing you need to do, everyone, is understand that you're either accumulating or you're actually seeking significance to validate who you are. And the truest form of validation is to look in the mirror and love and be proud of what you see. I could care less about what other people think of me because I'm so focused on how they care about them. And as I say, and I've said this on stage and many times on my live show, I don't care what you think about me, but boy, do I sure care about what you think about you. And every waking breath of my life is dedicated to it.
Thank you. Thank you for being the person that you are. And yes, that's so important, especially for the youth now. And I mean, not even for the youth, for everybody, because we're constantly chasing validations, chasing views, likes, everything else under the sun, whereas pleasing people for that matter, not doing certain things because people expect that of us. Within communities, it's expected for you to be in a particular way, so you kind of walk all over your own dreams and goals, and you behave in a particular way. That doesn't really fit well.
Yeah, but Rukia, even that statement of saying that you're expected, and if you're expected and you're outsourcing that in terms of that into external locus of control conversation we could have, but if you're using the word expectation in the context of someone else, you might as well just say you're waiting for someone's opinion to tell you what you should expect.
Yeah.
And the only validation you need to worry, it's like at the start of the show, and I get invited on, I haven't done too many of these of late because of things we're doing at the moment, but very kind for you to offer. Thank you for asking me. But when I sit on these things and people introduce me the way that they do, I almost feel embarrassed because I'm just, it's a little bit like going, here's our guest and he breathes. Here's our guest and she breathes. Here's our guest and they've got clothes on. And think, well, it's just what I do. Everyone, what is it that you just do? What is it that you just do? Don't worry about what anyone else thinks unless you're in the business of harming someone else, and then you need to be ashamed of yourself. But if you want to know whether humanity really cares less of each other, look at the face on everyone after the tsunami. Look at the face on everyone after someone runs onto a bridge in London and stabs somebody. Look at what happens when we find out that people can't speak to their loved ones when COVID's taking them. And if you see the look on humanity's face, that's the soul of what we represent as a species. But everyone thinks, no, I can't do that. Yeah, you can. Because if, God forbid, the next time something of that magnitude happens, God willing it won't, but there's a shooting in America, the look on everyone's face is the true expression of what it is to be human. And I think, and I've said this to the De Sede guests many times and soul shifters, 50 years from now, humanity will look on the correction that was COVID. Because we were running through a period of time in the last decade that we thought we were so smart we could drill on an asteroid. And then we worked out we couldn't stand next to each other in a supermarket. There's a window of opportunity for us, for each of us, to be an example of what humanity can be, because we all got told we couldn't be near each other. We've had a political system and a political voice that has just ranted the vibration of anger across the world. And all of that's passing. And there's a window of opportunity for you to step up and not be the next orator on the planet, but be the next orator in the community called your family, or be the next orator in the community called your personal self-talk.
And I like that you brought that up, personal self-talk.
Yep.
Most of the time, a lot of us don't know ourselves. So what are the kind of conversations that you'd encourage a person to have so that they get to know themselves
Most
better?
people don't know themselves because they're too afraid to ask.
Yep.
They're too afraid to ask. Why? Because the worry that they might... what did Mark Twain said? I think it was Mark Twain. Pardon me if it was someone else, but humankind's biggest problem is to sit quietly in a room alone. So what happened? COVID happened. We had to stay at home. Check this out. We had to stay at home, and you know that home, the one that we built, which has got all our memorabilia in it, yeah. And we had to stay with that husband or wife, you know, the person we chose to do life with, yeah. And then we had to stay with those group of people called children that husband or wife actually created. And everyone's got a mental health problem because they're now spending time with the people they chose. And I live by myself and I travel constantly, and this is the longest I've stayed anywhere, because since I last saw you, I think I've stayed in about 300 places. I'm just constantly moving because I never had a sense of self. So to your question, most people's self-talk is in three ways. It's either a whisper of doubt, or it's in two ways. It's either a whisper of doubt. Have you ever noticed, everyone, that whenever you doubt in your self-talk, it's that little sly, sinister little whisper? Mm-hmm. But then when you get a roar of conviction and you're really positive about something, it's roaring inside your head. My comment towards everyone is, if you want to... I tell everyone in De Sede land this: go for a walk as if you're going to speak to me, and pick out your phone and go for a walk and ring me up, go to your voice message and literally ring as if you're speaking to me, and have or your significant other or me, as I use it as an example, and just speak about an issue that's in your life. Just speak and, hey Steve, blah 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 blah, hey Steve, blah blah blah, and just talk and talk. And by the time you're a minute in, you'll have forgotten that you're not on the phone because of the visual subliminal messaging to it, and then sit down and listen to it. And listen to your doubt, listen to your second guessing. There's probably 4,000 or 5,000 voice notes on my phone. I do it all the time, and everyone goes, oh, you're really positive, Steve. I am constantly checking in to make sure that whisper is not slyly trying to get in under my skin. And you know what? Every day in some way it does. But what is your responsibility for you, and what are the priorities in your life? And we can get to that if you want me to do that. But most people's self-talk is because they have no expectation of what they want. They have an expectation of what they need to do to achieve someone else's opinion of satisfaction. And what's another word, satisfaction? Validation. Because we're really different. And I often say this to people. Back in caveman days, we sat in a cave and scribbled on a wall with a pen. Today, we sit in condos and scribble on an iPad with a pen, and everyone says we're different. We're exactly the same. We're herd animals, and herd animals have a tendency to cluster, hence the herd. And whenever a herd clusters, two things happen. Someone steps out and displays the art of the possible, and the majority sit and look at each other and compare. Your life is either going to be one of comparison and disappointment, or the art of the possible of looking for people that you can either follow or looking for yourself to follow. And your imagination is fueled by what you consume.
True that. True that.
I'm trying to do this as fast as I can.
No, you don't have to go as fast as you can.
You know me. So anyway.
Yes. You can go so deeper into the layers of this.
Yep.
So people are comparing, and they're constantly comparing, and you're also comparing yourself to the way people are comparing, etc. So how do you break that pattern?
Draw a triangle and ask yourself, what are the three biggest priorities in your life?
Okay. Tell us more.
Draw a triangle, and on each point of the triangle, doesn't matter where, what are the three most important priorities of your life? And we'll role play and do a couple. One of them might be your family, one of them might be your job and your career, and one of them might be your hobbies or your charities.
Right.
The second thing you need to do is prioritize those three. Which is the biggest priority? Well, how do I do that, Steve? Okay, if something happened in your family, would it affect your job and your charities? Out of 10, how high? Cool. If something happened in your job, how much would that impact your family and your charities? And then if something happened in your charities, how much impact would that have? Classic example. If something happened and you were at work with your family or your charity, would it have you running out your office on compassionate grounds? Probably not. Probably yes. If something happened in your charity, would that necessarily have you running out of your office? Probably not. So your family is probably going to be your biggest priority. So number one, what are the three priorities in your life? Number two, by asking what is the impact on this to the other two, go around and ask that question, and you'll identify which is the top, the second. So what's the gold, silver, bronze? Then in each one of those, ask yourself, what is the three priorities of each of those three? Number four, you've now got 9 priorities across the three biggest things in your life. Number 5, ask yourself, of those 9 life priorities, of the 3 biggest things in my life, what is the top 3? Now, one of them might be your family. And the people will go, well, that's easy, Steve. It's just my family. No, one might be your family. The other might be the financial means that you support your family. And then the third one might be time. Who knows? So if you do that exercise, what are the 3 big priorities of your life? Order those into 1, 2, 3. Against each one, put 3 priorities against each. You've now got the 9 priorities of the 3 most important things in your life. Then ask yourself, what are the top 3 things that I need to do? And watch how it commands your attention, your expectation, and your time. Rook, that's fast. But that's the simplest way. And there's a video, I've done a video on that. It will come out shortly, and I can let you know when it comes out. That is the simplest way of being able to say, what are the top 3 things in my life based on the 9 big things in my life, based on the 9 biggest categories of my life, based on the priorities of what's important in my life. Because people will go, oh, my work's really important. That guy walked out the door when he found out that his daughter was unfortunately in the circumstance, and he didn't come back for 6 or 7 weeks. And it was about 3 weeks after the London bombings, and we were doing counter-terrorism work. He just left, and no one bat an eyelid about him going. So that's, if you want to know about where your self-talk is, you can, most people are worried about what other people will think, and their self-talk reflects that. I am so focused on what I'm doing, I haven't got time to worry about what people think. I'm doing this quickly because I'm focused on, I'm putting out these nuggets because it's going to hit one of your audience, whether it's on this live or whether people watch it on repeat. I am actually just spraying things across your audience because it will hit someone. It'll hit someone. It'll hit someone. Melody came on my show and she could barely breathe. She was so nervous. Today, she's negotiating contracts to create content, and she was speaking to me quickly on a call. In the space of 6 months, she's gone from almost not being able to speak on my live show to now someone I ring up and ask for advice. And I
Wow.
call her De Sede Lady Guru, because Stephen De Sede, you mentor Stephen De Sede, and she does. I ring her up and ask her for advice. The other thing to be mindful of, everyone, look at someone, and there's a video I only posted on this on my LinkedIn today. Look for people who have a perspective that's in advance of your intuition, your instinct, your knowledge, your intuitiveness, your perspective, your values. Go and look at people. So in Melody's case, she's got a very, very strong faith-based perspective. So I sometimes ring her up and go for coffee with her virtually, asking her questions about faith-based.
She's there.
She is, I know. So the end result is, everyone, don't think that you have to go and find a guru. Go and find people who represent something you admire, something you aspire to, someone that's got a certain perspective that you admire.
True that. So important to find that and anchor that person within your own self, for that matter.
Yeah. Go and find people who have a value, an intuition, an instinct, a perspective, a care, a love, a gratitude, all of the characteristics and values that you pride yourself in. Go and find people who are exceptional at it and ask to have coffee with them. As opposed to, I need to go and find out the guru who, if I give him my email address, he'll tell me about the pool that I'm standing in front of, and it's a green screen and it's not real.
So yes, we've got people watching in from on LinkedIn. We've got Kunain, we've got Melody, we've got Palak, we've got Yasin who tuned in. Cindy is still watching, and yes, everyone's here. Hassan as well. Thank you, everybody, for giving this conversation your time. If you have any questions, do shoot them across so that we know what to speak to you about. And yes, if you're new to the conversation, to the platforms, do subscribe, do support the host platforms too. Okay, we have Melody who says, God put them in your life for a reason. That's so important. And okay, from reason, I'm going to shift towards caution. So people sometimes are so cautious about certain things that they fail to take action. There's certain things that hold them back. So what could you give us as wisdom to tackle that situation where, they're being so cautious that you're not taking action and then you regret later, or maybe don't even realize that's something to regret about?
Yeah, I always say to people that quitting is when you lost sight of why you started. And in the context of what you just asked me, you mentioned earlier in the conversation about boundaries, and I often talk to people about if you and I don't know why, because I don't come from a farming background, but if you think of going in and your life is like a farm or a field, right? Bye, Cindy. If you thank you for stopping by, Cindy. I appreciate it. If you think,
I'm going to actually interrupt you there. Sorry.
Sure.
Cindy is someone who watches my lives every single day. She's been my longest standing supporter. She is amazing as a person, and she's always there for me. She currently is in a different space at the moment, and which is why I was so excited when I was finally able to say hi, Cindy, to her after a very long time. So I'm super, super happy that she tuned in today, especially in this conversation, because I'm sure it was valuable to her. So
whereabouts is she?
She is in the US. She is in Ohio.
What does she do?
She is a retired teacher and a cancer survivor twice.
What does she want to do?
She wants to be a writer, and yes, so currently there are certain health challenges, but she's a brave woman, and I call her a warrior woman. So yes.
Okay, we'll do this really quick. This is a gift to Cindy, because anyone who's got a heart and soul like you, and hence the reason you smile the way you do, and you speak of Cindy. So this is my gift to Cindy on behalf of Rukia. If you want to tell a really great story, everyone thinks a great story is, this is my story of struggle, or this is my story of glowing success. And if you draw 3 circles, two on either side, 1 in the middle, make sure you tell about your stories. Just tell about your success. So I very quickly mentioned that I was very successful in England. I then very quickly talked about the struggle of my marriage decaying and all those types of sad things. But you tell about the success and you tell about the struggle, but you teach in the switch. That moment, what happened, and all of a sudden I taught, and you teach in the switch. So Cindy, if you're going to create really great writing, people don't want to know about your story of struggle or story of success. They want to know that dark valley journey. Because I often say to people, I don't mind if you're in the dark valley because I'll come get you because I know the way out. So, and in the context of whether it's your story of struggle, your story of success that you tell, but you teach in that switch moment. What was it that happened that day when Helen asked me, what did the accident mean? And I taught in that. It's because people don't want to know about your struggles. They've got their own. They don't want to know how successful you are. They've got their own, but they want to know what happened that made you switch. What happened that made you get up? What happened? What happened? The switch in the movie Titanic was not when the iceberg hit the boat in the context of that James Cameron movie. It's when she went to the bow and said she was going with him. The whole energy of the movie changed and then the iceberg thing happened. Cindy, last one. In each area of those story of struggle, success and switch, there are three things you need to do in each of them. What is the story? What is the stat? And what is the share? So when you're teaching in your story of that switch moment, when you survive cancer for the second time, bless you, Cindy, when you survive, what was the story in a sentence? What was the statistic in terms of the time it happened? And then what was the share? In my case, I read, here's the story, here's the stat, and here's the share in terms of my journey to England. I read a book by a guy called Bill Gates. Here's the stat. It was in 1997, and he told me about the superhighway and how I was going to be disintermediated. Here's the share. I went to England because I was good with people, and there were 64 million. How could I possibly fail? Bang, bang, bang. I just told a story that went for 3 years in 3 sentences. So Cindy, if you want to be a great writer, share about the success, tell. Share about the struggle, tell, but teach in the moment of switch. And that moment of switch needs to be, what's the story, what's the stat, and what's the share? Because people want to know what the share is. They want to know what the stat is for context, and they want to know the story for relatability. Epic storytelling in 2 minutes.
Okay, we have a question, and it's from Abdullah, my son. He says, "What's your?"
Is that your son that I met?
Yes, it is.
Hello, young man. How you doing, buddy? Is he in? He's in Melbourne.
He's in Melbourne at the moment. Yes.
Which way's Melbourne? Melbourne's down there. Hey, how you doing? I'm in Sydney. What's understanding? Okay, what do you want me to answer that? Do you?
Yes, please. So what's your understanding of ego, and what can be good or bad for your own ego?
Okay. Your two ways of looking at this, and we'll do both quickly. Number one, think of the most egotistical person that you know. You're welcome, Cindy, you're welcome. Think of the most egotistical person that you know. Got them? Don't have to tell me who they are. There's 2 characteristics of the most egotistical person you know. They are always right, and they never put themselves in a position of being wrong. Your ego has 2 jobs and 2 jobs only. It's to protect you, and thank God it does, because it was the ego that made us run away from the dinosaurs back in the day. It's our ego that makes us jump back from seeing that squiggly thing on the street that we thought was a snake. It's our ego that makes us jump back to protect us in the amygdala and all that brain stuff. The first thing your ego needs to do is to protect you. The second thing your ego needs to do is make you right. And if you think of the most humble, iconic leaders in the world, they didn't care about their ego. They switched it off. They saw their ego so back to the question, your ego is bad if it rules your intuition and your instinct. So what you need to do is forget about ego. Just forget about it. The mechanics of your safety mechanisms of your amygdala and the things that happen with your reptilian brain, they'll keep you intact. You need to have an attitude of being caring with intuitive instinct from your heart and soul, because your ego's from your mind trying to protect you. So every single time, whether it's you see a nice, talking about your son, we see a nice girl across the bar, or you see some opportunity at work, or you see someone you want to go and talk about, or you see something that you want, the first thing that happens is your ego floods your brain with fear. to stop you from taking action because it assumes you're going to be at risk. And all you're going to do, and I'll use the gentleman walking over to a lady in a bar, you're going to walk over to a lady in a bar and go, hello. And the worst she's going to do is say, no, thanks. But we get, for those of us who have had that happen, we get so fraught with this fear that it's, oh, she's going to shoot me and throw me in a can. No, the worst case, your ego will flood your brain with fear. So to answer the question, understand the mechanics of your reptilian brain and your amygdala, which is in the space of the spine of your brain, will protect you. Your job is to follow your intuition and your instinct. Because most of the time, your ego is trying to convince you you're not well, you're in danger. So you'll walk down the street and you'll see a squiggly piece of string on the ground and you'll jump back assuming it's a snake before you have even logically decided and identified it's not. So the most useful thing with your ego is switch it off. Because if you think of Mandela and those people, they have no ego. They're just being present to who they are.
That was powerful. I'm just going to let that sink in first.
Your reptilian brain and your amygdala will take care of you. If you don't believe me, walk down the street and the next time you see a squiggly thing on the ground and you jump back without even identifying it, that's your reptilian brain and your amygdala keeping you safe. When you go to step on the street and you forgot to look to your left and your right, and you go, oh my goodness, and you step back, that's your reptilian brain and your amygdala keeping you safe. You don't need to walk into a personal situation in a business, in work, potentially romance, whatever it might be. And when that fear comes over your body, it's your brain being flooded with fear by your ego to stop you because, oh, the girl in the corner, you might go and say hello to, and she might actually bite your head off. Yeah, she might spend the rest of your life with you and have children as well. So be careful.
All right. Okay. Now you said switch the ego off, and I'm just going to play the devil's advocate because I like doing that.
Go for it.
You switch the ego off. You go from a place of service, you be present, you don't think about the others. But what if people walk all over you?
Boundaries. Thank you for reminding me. If you think, I'll go back to what I said before, and it's your son's fault for distracting me. So good to hear from him. So good to hear from him. I hope he's well down in Melbourne. And your daughter. If you think of your life like an open field, and I did this for a long time in my life, you kind of go into this field and it's almost like the drop of blue dye in a glass of water. It drops in and it stains everything. So the end result is, and I was doing this with a lady in India about a year ago, where she had some issues, don't know what they were, even if I did, I wouldn't share, but there were some pretty specific issues that were very disrespectful to her as a lady. So one of the things that I said is you need to create fence lines in let's just assume your life is like a huge paddock, one of those sprawling paddocks and those beautiful farms you see in different parts of the world. And that's your life, but you can't live your life without boundaries, without fence lines. And one of the things I said to her, and it was something to do with guys or whatever, or a male circumstance in her life, I said, what you need to do is you just need to put a fence line around that. And you almost put like it's a little paddock. And that little paddock becomes something that there's a fence and a boundary that protects you. And you'll get to a point that you can comfortably walk along the fence line and not feel uncomfortable because you don't have to go in there. Most of us actually get to a point where we're so cautious of walking into the field of our life because there's no boundaries. Now, I don't care what people think about me because I'm too busy caring and thinking about them, but I'm also mindful of how hurtful it is, and it's happened just this week gone, where people will just make the assumption, Steve's so fast, he's so quick, he's so giving, I'll use him up. And it happens all the time. Happens all the time. So one of the things I do is I'm very conscious about how do you guard your heart? And there's a thing inside of De Sede land called the 6 life guardians. And one of those is guard your heart and forgive and then move on. And the best way of guarding your heart is to go, this is my boundary condition. It's bordered around here. And it's bordered around here. I won't step in there. But if someone wants to step out and disrespect me, I'll just keep going. So one of the things is create boundaries in your life, fence lines, and you can walk right up to the fence. We walk to the zoo and there's some gorilla on the other side of the zoo. We'll walk up to the fence and we'll look at it. We certainly won't cross the fence line because we know it's dangerous, but we'll still go and look. So what you need to do is switch off your ego, follow your intuition and your instinct, but have boundary conditions around how you guard your heart, because your heart is where your soul, your heart is where your intuition and instinct comes from. And then you create boundary conditions. So if someone is going to present themselves to you in a disrespectful way, you know what that's like. So recently someone asked me to write their CV for them and get back to me on Monday, because I've got the weekend off, Stephen. I've got other things to do. And I'm going, do I look as if I'm someone who gets Friday notice of writing a CV? If you were a dear friend, I might do it. And if I did do it, I wouldn't expect to be asked with 2 days notice. And oh, by the way, I'm busy on the weekend, but get it done for me, will you? Thinking, I know you're talking to me, but you can't be.
Yeah.
Boundary condition.
True.
So put boundary conditions in your life.
Great. I also like the fact that you spoke about forgiveness and guard your heart. A
Yes.
little bit on that, please.
If it's a little bit like the boundary conditions, if you enter with, and I do this all the time, and Melody and other De Sede guests know this because of the nature of what I do inside of De Sede land and stuff. If you don't have a way to actually guard your heart, and you're guarding your heart is literally, I'm guarding my heart by not jumping the fence at the zoo and going and shaking hands with the gorilla. I'm guarding my heart because I'm going to conduct myself based on my values and my beliefs, my values and beliefs on how I want to conduct myself. And then you just be cautious and you be on alert for that. Okay. So in terms of how you guard your heart and forgive, you forgive yourself because most people are not forgiving of themselves. And this is the best one that I can say to you. Most people live their life thinking forgiveness is a feeling. It's not, it's a commitment.
Ooh,
and a guy whose childhood sweetheart got murdered 18 months after they got married. He taught me that. He said, Steve, you're waiting to feel forgiveness. He said, a year after this guy stabbed my wife in the chest in Southeast Asia just because he wanted to, they executed him, and they sent me a letter saying that they firing squad had shot him. And he said he'd already taken enough from me. I made a commitment to forgive him because there was nothing more he could take. And all he was going to take is each morning me waking up thinking of what I'd lost. He said, so everyone, stop thinking of forgiveness as a feeling. It's a commitment. And you need to have a commitment to guard your heart. You need to have a commitment to forgive those people who think that Stephen De Sede is a CV writer. And oh, by the way, can you do it by Monday because I'm busy?
Of course. And you aren't.
And guess why? Oh, you write really well, Stephen. You're really good with words, so you could write my CV. Oh, really? At any point, are you going to stop long enough for the common courtesy of whether you think that's an appropriate thing to ask me? But it happens all the time, because if you are going to be as loving and caring with a beautiful smile on your face, I guarantee if we spoke about this longer, you could list off almost on a daily basis people that take for granted the fact that you've got an angelic face with a beautiful smile and a heart of gold, and some people are going to walk over it. You know why? Because they hate themselves, so they're going to try and outsource their hatred. Everyone, if you want to be a victim, you need a victim. Why? Because you need someone to blame. If you think of anyone in your life that's got a victim mentality, run, Forrest, run, because they're going to be looking for a victim to outsource their blame. How many people are outsourcing their blame because the life is so hard? It's his fault, him's fault, their fault, her fault, the economy's fault, Trump's fault, COVID's fault. It's the weather's fault. I don't even know what the weather is tomorrow, but it's going to be the weather's fault that I'm having a bad day. If you find anyone in your life that's a victim, everyone, be careful that they don't outsource their blame to you.
Ooh. So we got one more question. Do you have a few minutes extra? You might want.
That's right.
Yeah, thank you.
It's 12 o'clock in Sydney. I'm fine. I'm cutting into my beauty sleep.
Yes, people.
And if you haven't noticed, I need beauty sleep. But still, no, this is fine. I do stuff with the Saudis at midnight every week. So that's fine.
Look at it this way. You would have either been doing it at 12, at 11, or at 4 a.m., waking up, disturbing your beauty sleep and doing it. So thank you.
Beautiful. I would have got up in a heartbeat for you at 4 a.m. I just think you and your family and what you represent is the reason I breathe.
Thank you so much, Steve.
You're welcome.
So Kanan asks, what's the relationship of ego and death? Is all fear the ego's fear of death? Huh?
No, no.
What's the relationship of ego and death?
Yeah, no, I think I understand, and you can send a follow-up note if we've got this wrong. But I think the comment there is ego just afraid of death?
Oh, okay. All
Yeah,
right. So then if you're
and
watching, just interact so that we know we're on the right track with
yeah,
your.
the last after the comma is where it all is all fear, the ego's fear of death. No, the ego, and thank God we have the ego. By the way, how do you pronounce that gentleman's name? Just so I get it right.
Kunen.
Kunan. Pardon me if I've got that wrong, Kunan. Kunan, your ego's job is to do two things: is to make you feel, it's to keep you protected, and to make you feel right, which is a form of protection. So there's the physical protection of not allowing you to run in front of a bus, and then there's the actual emotional protection of making sure you don't put yourself in an awkward position. So that's the ego's job. The ego is not, jumping in front of a bus could cause you to get run over and your life ends. I understand that. But the ego's job is to protect you and keep you out of harm's way. And yes, some of harm's way could end up being terminal. But the fear of the ego is not about death. The fear of the ego is just protecting you physically and protecting you emotionally. And it will do it whether it's a false physical threat, i.e. there's a squiggly thing on the ground and I jump back because it's a snake and you haven't even identified what it is, but you react. You go to cross the street and forget to look to the left and look to the right and do those things, and you forgot because you're busy, and all of a sudden you look up and oh my, and there's nothing coming, but you've just stepped into an area that could be dangerous, and your ego's reminded you, don't be so foolish. So it's not a question of a fear of death. It's protecting you from any physical harm. It's protecting you from any emotional harm. So if you go back to that person we talked about that's in our lives, we all know who they are, that are very egotistical. They never want to put themselves in any physical harm, and they sure as heck don't want to put themselves in any emotional harm. Emotional harm being a position of they're wrong.
Yeah.
Hence egotistical. So I always say that to people, think of the most egotistical person, got them? Yeah, cool. They never put themselves in a position of being wrong, and they never ever admit that they're wrong. Yeah, so physically and emotionally, they never place themselves in being wrong. The ego is not about the fear of death. The ego is about keeping you out of harm's way.
True that.
Ego tries to keep you in your comfort zone. No, because the ego doesn't think of comfort zone. The it's literally trying to protect you. A comfort zone is a conscious choice. And yeah, I understand what you're saying, Melody, but the ego is not trying to keep you in your comfort zone, because most people are going to sit. They're not going to make an emotional decision to reach. They're not going to make an emotion which might make them feel mentally and emotionally wrong. They're not going to make a physical decision to step out because that might be wrong. So they sit in anxiety, depression, doubt. They don't want to do anything, and that's not a comfort zone. That's the irony is, on the other side of taking action, and this was something that I said on the weekend, your life will expand or contract based on your application of courage.
True that. And Melody says, I stand corrected.
No, it's just sometimes, Melody, if you don't act, you don't act emotionally because you might be wrong. You don't take action physically because you might get hurt. So you stay where you are, and boy, oh boy, we all know that's not called a comfort zone.
No, that's like sitting on the fence and
Yeah.
watching the game go by.
Yes.
All right. Last question. I promise you this is my last question. And I really have to bring this up because we spoke about boundaries. We spoke about, going to the fence, watching the gorilla, not going, shaking hands, and also forgiveness. What about those times when your boundaries are also interrupting your connection with others because you're trying to protect yourself so much that you're not sharing yourself completely, where you're holding back to share because of any past experiences or anything at all. It could be anything. So your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's a difference between being cautious and being afraid. Being cautious is to make a commitment to being cautious from your point of view. Is, hey, Steve, do you mind if I ask you a couple more questions? As an hour I hope we haven't gone too long, and justifying about the 4 a.m., which is all really sweet. And I understand where you're coming from. That's just being courteous. It's being cautious. Is it okay, Steve? As opposed to being in a situation of people just being blunt and afraid. So your boundary conditions and your level of cautiousness and your level of management of your instinct and your intuition needs to be, ask yourself this: if I'm going to go into that group, that individual, that company, that hobby, that interest, does it have any resemblance of the type of characteristics of value and integrity and pride that I admire? And if it does, then go for it. If you were in Washington a few weeks ago and you were surrounded by people who were bashing windows in a Capitol, regardless of your political persuasions, that's just an energy and an attitude and behaviour you don't want to be around. So if you're in a situation of being so cautious, don't kid yourself that caution is just flat out fear. And now your ego's owning you because you're not doing anything. So if you are going to approach someone, if you are going to get involved in something, if you are going to back something, if you're going to support something, what is the demonstrable values and principles and characteristics of the behaviour or the value proposition that those entities represent, and make a value judgment and cautiously approach with an exit strategy if you need it.
I like that. With the exit strategy, that is so, so important.
Yeah.
So looks like we have, Kunan says, thanks, Stephen, got it.
You're welcome.
So perfect, brilliant. Thank you. So we are way over the hour. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone, for joining in today. I am sure this was a very, very powerful session. The promise was no nonsense, straight talk, and this is what he delivered, as always. So thank you, Steve, once again for joining in. And to everybody else watching the replay and tuning in on the live, thank you for being part of this conversation.
Thank you.
Good night and have a lovely rest of the day.
Be well and be brilliant, everyone. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you.